We have another breaking news episode for you here involving the Ohio State Buckeyes and a Buckeye entering the transfer portal. This time it is former walk-on tight end Patrick Gurd. He's been a contributor for the Buckeyes for the last couple of seasons, earned a bigger role for himself after initially walking onto the team. He's had 2 catches in his career, but these contributions on the field have gone way beyond that. A lot of it has involved blocking and being a really useful piece for the Buckeyes in goal line situations and short yardage situations. So going to get into his career a little bit, and then we'll let you know at the end of the show kind of where things stand with the tight end room right now and heading into the 2025 season. But let's start a little bit with some background on Gerd. Tight end coming out of New Albany High School, just east of Columbus. He was a walk-on. His dad actually was a former Buckeye, played sort of the late Earl Bruce, early John Cooper years, played in 28 games, including 10 as a starter. So he had a Buckeye legacy, and he earned his way into a bigger role with the Buckeyes throughout his career, playing both on offense and special teams. He, as I said, was a former walk-on, but has lettered twice for the Buckeyes, and probably going to letter as well in 2024, you would assume. So he's turned into a pretty significant role player for the Buckeyes, and the expectation is that he will stay on for the continuation of the college football playoff, for the remainder of the college football playoff, with the Cotton Bowl against the Texas Longhorns. And then if the Buckeyes win that, then moving on down to the national championship game in Atlanta on January 20th against either Notre Dame or Penn State. Now, Gerd only caught 2 passes in his career, caught 1 against Minnesota in 2023 and 1 against Western Michigan in 2024. But as I said earlier, his contributions to the team went substantially beyond that. And he feels like someone he reminds me a little bit maybe of Sam Wiglus. And Wiglus was another former Ohio State walk-on you might remember from a couple of years ago. He was a wide receiver, so this is not a one-to-one comparison by any means, but Wiglus was a walk-on at Ohio State, and you saw him get just sort of situational run here and there, and it was kind of like, oh, look at that. He made he had a nice catch here, or he made a nice play here, and then he transferred to Ohio University and turned into a real standout wide receiver for the Bobcats. He played Curtis Rourke before he transferred to Indiana, was the quarterback at Ohio University, and he and Wiglus really turned into a really dynamic pair for the Bobcats back in the 2023 season. So you wonder now, it feels like Patrick Gurd has an opportunity potentially. He's probably not going to put up Sam Wiglus level stats just because of it's sort of a different role than Wiglus was as a wide receiver, but could have that kind of an impact on a team in somewhere in the MAC, Cincinnati, somewhere like that. We'll see where he ends up, but you would think probably a decent chance that Patrick Gurd turns into a contributor wherever he goes. One of those guys you never heard a bad word about him from anyone associated with the Ohio State team. Just did everything the right way, played his role really, really well. Reminded you, it kind of sort of the follow up to Mitch Rossi on the Ohio State team. You might remember Mitch Rossi. He was a tight end who was also sort of a goal line fullback. He actually had a touchdown against Rutgers a couple of years back, and Gerd did not have a touchdown in his career, but sort of similar in terms of the role he played on the team and the fact that you ended up seeing him more and in bigger situations than you might have sort of expected. So now the question is, all right, where to next for the Ohio State tight end room? Remember, G. Scott is a senior. He is leaving after this year. Will Kazmarek, speaking of Ohio University, the former Bobcat, Will Kazmarek, he is expected to return for 2025. So that gives you Ohio State one name at the top of the depth chart. And you also have other guys. Bennett Christian expected to be back. Jelani Thurman expected to be back. Max LeBlanc was a tight end, a true freshman this year. He's expected to be back. There's 4. And then you bring in 2 other guys who are true freshman tight ends as well, Nate Roberts and Brody Lennon. Those guys are both coming in this year as well. So potentially some significant depth of the Buckeyes. And that's even before you get to Max Clare, who is the transfer from Purdue, who the Buckeyes brought in just a couple weeks ago through the transfer portal. So depth, probably not a big concern for Ohio State at tight end right now. And you have a variety of players there who have some really different skill sets. Kazmarek has shown some receiving ability, had a big catch against Oregon in the first game, although Oregon fans will tell you that it was probably not a catch, should not have been a catch. That was actually the play where Kazmarek hurt his arm and missed a good chunk of the season. But he has been, when he's been out there, a little bit of a receiver, but a whole lot of a blocker for the Buckeyes at tight end. He's going to be his return is going to bring quite a bit of veteran depth, veteran skill, and veteran strength to that room. That is a very, very big one. After him, Jelani Thurman. Jelani Thurman is someone who has sort of been earning a bigger role in that tighter end room over the years. He came in with a lot of hype, and it took a little while to get going, but you've seen him take on a bigger and bigger role this season. Thurman has gone through the course of the season he kind of in the middle of the year was not getting a lot of snaps. Towards the end of the year, getting more. He played 7 snaps against Tennessee, did not play in the Rose Bowl on offense, but that was probably a little bit more situational because towards the end of the regular season against Purdue, Northwestern, Indiana, he was getting a decent amount of run. Bennett Christian, sort of the same thing. Bennett Christian has been even getting more snaps than Jelani Thurman throughout the course of the season. Figure he's going to have a nice role. And then Max LeBlanc, true freshman, that's a position, the tight end position. They talk about that being such a developmental position. It's almost like the offensive line in that way, because as a tight end in the Big Ten, you've got to be able to catch the ball like a Big Ten wide receiver, but you also got to be able to block Big Ten defensive ends. That's something that just takes some time, usually in the weight room, physical development, all that kind of stuff. It's a little bit of a position where you got to be a little bit patient. So Max LeBlanc, we will see how he turns out. But then the other Max that is in the mix, boy, that's not easy to say. The other Max in the mix is Max. Now I've screwed myself up. The Purdue tight end transfer who I mentioned earlier. He's coming in, and he is a little bit more of a receiving threat than anyone really in this group. That Max Clare, he's coming in from Purdue, and he is a little bit more of a receiving threat than anyone in the returning group for Ohio State. He was a major addition, considered in a lot of cases the top tight end in the transfer portal. He had 51 catches, 685 yards, and 4 touchdowns for the Boilermakers this year. That's a significant receiving threat. And he's someone who can maybe bring something like what G. Scott brought to the Ohio State offense this year. You've seen G. Scott take on a bigger role in the passing game throughout the course of the season. Had that enormous play on the very first play of the Rose Bowl, 30-something yard reception. If they can get anything close to that from Max Clare, probably going to be very happy. Clare, in his last 3 games of the season, 7 catches, 91 yards, and a touchdown against Penn State. 7 catches, 83 yards, and a touchdown against Michigan State. 5 catches, 36 yards against Indiana. His season high, 6 catches, 133 yards against Illinois. He had a monster season, 13.4 yards per reception for Max Clare this year for Purdue. Figure those numbers probably going to drop a little bit for Ohio State just next year, just based on the fact that, there's a lot more skill talent on the Ohio State team. So you're probably not relying quite as heavily on the tight end. But if the tight end is one of your leading receiving threats and he's able to get open then, if you've got more talent around him, if Jeremiah Smith's on the field with you, it's probably going to open up some things in the passing game as well there for you. So there you go. So that is a little bit of a quick look ahead at the Ohio State tight end room for 2025, but all centered around the fact that Patrick Gurd, former walk-on Ohio State tight end, entering the transfer portal, but expected to stick with the team through the rest of the season. We also are expected to stick with the team the rest of the season. Tony, Kevin, and I getting ready to hop on an airplane down to Texas for the Cotton Bowl. That game is coming up on Friday, of course. We will be down there Tuesday night and have full coverage for you Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday for the Cotton Bowl. And then after that, have a little bit of a recap day for you on Saturday before we head home. And then perhaps we will see if the Buckeyes head to Atlanta. We will be there as well. But you can follow along with all of it at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. We got our whole team of X's and O's gurus there to make you a smarter football fan, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.